Hey fellas, had somebody on the last video comment that I should take a sip of coffee before I start the video. So I did. Took several sips. In fact, I'm almost done. So we'll just go ahead and finish up. Good stuff. Welcome to part 2 of painting Tamiya's 1/48 scale P-38 Lightning. And this is another longer video. I don't know how many times I'll do that. I may do it occasionally. I don't know that I'll do it all the time. It does take a lot of time to do. And I'm not sure if everybody likes it, but some people do. Anyway, this is not the easiest thing to paint on camera, so I do my best. So there are some portions of the video where it's kind of hard to tell what I'm doing, especially when I reviewed it. I put these bare metal foil mirrors on. I show you how I cut those out and do those, and it's even hard to show you on camera just because the way the plane's built. So just kind of bear with me there. I do my best. So this one will be for sale on eBay. I will post a link in the description. And if you just want to see the finished model, to get a look at it, I got some pictures and I'll post a timestamp here. And so let's just get on with the video. Okay, so last we left off, it was time for decals. And like I said before, I'm going to paint on the star insignia. So how I do that, let's run through this real quick. I've got my calipers out. And basically what I'll do is I'll come along here and I'll measure the diameter of the circle, which was like 0.1, it's 16 millimeters, so it would be 1.6 centimeters. And the reason I transfer it to centimeters is because my Cricut, and if you've never seen a Cricut before, C-R-C-U-T, I've mentioned it 1,000 times in my other videos. It's a vinyl cutter, and there's another vinyl. I'm sure there are several vinyl cutters out there. This just happens to be a really accessible one you can get anywhere. I use it to make t-shirts, and I also use it to make masks. It does have limitations on how small it can cut, and that depends also on the material. So the material I'm using is, for my mask, is Tamiya sticker sheet, which is basically Tamiya tape spread out on a big sheet. And you can see I've just got a piece cut here. And that's what I typically like to use. Now there is this Ortamask 810S that is like a vinyl. A lot of people like to use this. I haven't had much luck with it. I am going to try it again. I'm going to try to do the letters. Let's see. I'm going to try to do the letters, but they're really small, and I don't think my Cricut can cut that small. Let's see. So I've got these set up, and I've already cut them out. So basically what I've done is I've created the circles the same size as the diameter on the decals. And then I came in here and I picked out a star shape. And as you can see, I've got the stars, and then I just cut them. I didn't have to measure the stars. I just was able to fit them inside the circle by eye. So I've got these stars cut out as well on my sticker sheet. And we'll move over to the plane.
I found this on the web.
Okay, Alexa, or Siri. I've got these cut out. And what I've done...
I'm not sure about that.
Oh my gosh, I've got all kinds of things talking to me. So I've got the circle cut out, and I use that as a guide. So the first thing I do is I place the empty circle where I want it on the plane, okay? Now I'll take some, this is transfer tape. It's kind of used and icky. But I'll take some transfer tape, and I'll use that to lift up the outside part of the mask. Okay. We don't need that. Okay. Get this out of the way. Doing stuff on camera is a lot harder than doing stuff off camera. Gosh, I'm trying to get in here in my stupid setup. Okay, so then I'll just take the outside part of the mask. Line it up. Sometimes getting this to line just right. It's a bit tedious. This doesn't seem to be aligning very well. When you get down to a small scale like this, I want to get it as perfect as possible. Because I do want my star to match up, so we'll go ahead. Cut this off. And then we can come in here. We do have just a tiny lip right there. That piece didn't go down exactly as I wanted. Okay, now I've got the outside mask. Go ahead and lift up the dot, and I will no longer need it. Okay. All right. Now I'll just take some regular tape. And mask off around this, and we will be ready to start throwing down some paint. Now you can cut these out by hand, but it's a lot simpler for me to do it with the Cricut and a lot more accurate. Trying to cut a circle out on a piece of tape, I just can't do it. I've got a little like compass thing, circle cutter, and it doesn't work with the crap. So that's why I like to do it with Cricut if I can, because it is so precise. See how precise that is? Okay, so I'm gonna go grab some paint. What I'm gonna do first is I'm going to spray some olive drab around the edges of this. Okay, because if I just come in here, because after that I'm gonna spray down the white, and then I'll place my star mask over top of the white, and then I'll spray the blue. But if I just spray the white down, sometimes I get lazy and I don't do this. Sometimes when I spray the white down, then I'll have a white line all the way around the circle. So in order to prevent that, I can go ahead and spray the olive drab and create like a barrier of olive drab around the circle. And that will prevent that white line. So I'm gonna get the rest of this masked up. I'll spray down my olive drab, then we'll spray down the white, and then go from there. Alrighty, so I've got the white laid down and it's nice and dry. So let's go ahead, and I've got the star. We'll see how this aligns. Just try to get it centered in that circle. And then aligned with that panel line right there. I think that should be good. And because I do have a little bit of height difference in this panel line here, which I didn't notice till now, we'll burnish that in. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I will take some star and bar color that I've mixed up with Tamiya paint. So I've got X3 an XF17 at a 2-to-1 ratio. Go ahead and bring some more light here. I'll go ahead and throw this in my airbrush, and then we'll throw it down and lift up the mask and see what we got. Let's go ahead. What I typically like to do, just go slow. And I'm gonna concentrate on this panel line here and darken that area up so it looks somewhat faded. And then maybe go a little bit lighter on the top to give it somewhat of a faded look. I could always come back with white and kind of fade it as well. Okay, just like that. We'll see how that looks. Go ahead and do the same thing on this one. We'll make it a little more dark on the bottom than on the top, like it was faded. Somebody asked me in my last video if I thought about making my own spray booth. I do have a spray booth, but for like videotaping purposes, it's just easier to do it here at my workbench. So it's not that I don't have one. And to be honest with you, I hardly ever use it because it is kind of small. And I've got a window right here at my workbench, or right here. My spray booth is right next. If you've seen my hobby room setup, my spray booth is right next to my window. And I've got a fan on, and it does a decent job at carrying out all the harmful vapors. And I'm not spraying a whole lot, which is why I'm not wearing a respirator right now. Not that I, need anybody's approval for my own health and safety, but when I do spray a lot and spray really bad stuff, I'll throw on a respirator. Okay. I didn't spray as thick of a coat as I probably should have of the olive drab, and then on the gray areas right around the circle. So I may end up with a white line. If I do, it is what it is. Kind of went a little light on it. Alright, so let's take a look at what we got. Get this stupid thing out of the way. My makeshift stand, which doesn't work really. All right. So there we go. Star and bar painted. Fairly simple. So I said I knew I was gonna paint these because it is so easy to do. You've got two shapes here, and it's really easy to do this. Now the lettering, I'm gonna try to find a material that will accept such small lettering. And if I can, I will make those and I will show you those. If not, then we'll go on to decaling. Just something that I don't really want to do because I don't like decaling. So let's see. Let's get this one peeled up, and then we'll cut to the next part. Right along here at the top, I got a little bit of white bleed through, but that's okay. Right. Here we go. nice and painted. Okay, so I think I'm going to at least be able to paint the numbers on the tail. So what I've done is I used this metallic vinyl that I had, this metallic stick-on vinyl. And the reason I use the metallic stuff is because it's kind of hard. It's a little stiffer than the other vinyl that I've got. So it holds together just a little bit better. Now, it's still really fine. And I had to use a font that is not the exact font that they have here. You can see that. This is more of a stencil. So what I did was I used, and I think it's called Amarillo Air Force font or something. It's what I typically use for like jets and stuff, for the numbers on jets. And but it's not a stencil. So what I've been doing, so I've got this down, and all these little bitty, I saved the little parts of the numbers because some of the center pieces kind of fall out. So I had to delicately place those back in. It's not perfect, but I think it'll suffice. So now what I'm doing is I'm making it into a stencil by using my Infinity cutting sheet and cutting real tiny strips. And then I will add the stencil part. And you can see why using the decals might be a better option. Just because this is a pain in the butt. So I'm just adding the little strips to make it into the stencil right here. And these are the tiniest strips that you can get on this. It's the 0.4 millimeter strips, which are probably still a little big for what this is, but I think it'll be okay. Now to position this, what I did, and I'll show you on the other side here, as soon as I get this down. The birds are chirping outside, fellas. It's so peaceful. So peaceful in my modeling room. Okay. Now, to get the position correctly, get this crap out of the way, what I've done is I've cut out the decal real close to the numbers to get the size of the number, and then I've taken a piece of tape and cut it the exact same width and length of this. And then by using the decal sheet here, I position my piece of tape to represent the numbers where I want it. Just like so. I think that should be good, be pretty close. All right, maybe, yeah, that should be right. Okay, and then I'll take a piece of tape, and then I can make my guide. So I know that I do not want to go beyond this line. I can't paint beyond that line. Take another piece of tape. And because something's just a little off, I'm not going to position it exact right along there. Going to give me just a little bit of leeway on the width. Just a little bit of leeway, okay? Now I can lift up my, what would be my decal. And then I will take, where it is. I don't have to use transfer tape for this because it is pretty stiff. Now I can just take this and I can line it up. Man, this is hard to do on camera. Line it up. And we should be good. Okay. And then I'll just go ahead and mask off the rest of it. And then I'll add my little bits, the little bit that's down here for the middle of the 6 and the middle of the 4. I'll add those, and then I'll go ahead and do the strips of tape. So that's how I'm getting around the ability of my Cricut to get these numbers stenciled and painted. So I've reached the limitations of what I can paint on. As you can see, I've got the 147 painted on, and then obviously the numbers on the tail. And Miss Virginia is right here, so I'm just going to use the decal for Miss Virginia. I'm not going to be able to paint that, is what it is. So I am going to gloss coat it with Tamiya X22 before I put the decals on. And I usually do gloss coat before I put decals down, but in this case it's a little more important because I do have the hairspray on there, so I want a protective coat. So hopefully when I'm trying to wrangle down the decals, especially on Miss Virginia where I've got hairspray up here, the X22 hopefully will protect against the paint from coming up after being wet. So there's another good reason for doing it. Now, what I want to do before I gloss coat it though is I'm going to paint the red and green lights on the wings. And before I actually paint the red and green, I am going to take a little bit of Vallejo white, and I'm just going to hit the tips of these lights here on the wing. Let's get some airbrush thinner. Now, when I do hand paint, I typically like to use Vallejo paints. I do think that those the Vallejo acrylics for brush painting are pretty good. So I'm just going to come in here and hit the tips of these. Now, I don't need to paint the whole thing. Just want to get the tips to add a little bit of highlight for my, it'll make the red and green stand out just a little bit better when I go to paint the red and green, if I add white underneath. Now I am going to do some shading along the bottom. Now I typically lose interest in painting and weathering the bottoms of my aircraft, but you can see there's literally no shading here on the bottom. It's just straight gray. So I think I will come in here with maybe some Tamiya smoke and do some shading on the panel lines. And then when I come in with oil paints, I might do a darker oil wash just to dirty the bottom up. But I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on the bottom, as I typically don't on my models. Okay. So now I'll hit this with a hairdryer and dry this white. And we'll use this Vallejo red for the red. But for the green, I like to use this Park Green X28 by Tamiya. So Let's hit this with a hairdryer real quick, make sure my white's dry. Alright, so let's get just a little bit of this red. Now I don't need, since I'm not really concerned with brush strokes or anything, because this is just such a small part, I'm not concerned with really thinning it down or using retarder on it, because it is not that, I'm basically just going to hit it and then move along. Something that tends to happen when I use red is I'll accidentally touch it with my finger. And get red paint over my parts I don't want to get on. Okay? That's all I'm doing. Hopefully I got the right side. Yep, should be the right side. Don't want to mix up my red and green sides. I always have a hard time getting red out of my brush. A lot of times what I like to do is after I get as much as I can out, I'll get my hardware store lacquer thinner that I use for my airbrush, and I'll dip my brush in there and then get the remaining out with that lacquer thinner. Okay. Shake up this green. Get this out of the way because I won't be needing that. And we'll just do the same thing with this bright green color on the wingtip. Just like so. Now, after I will finish this eventually with a flat coat, and then what I'll do is I'll come back with a gloss. I usually use the Future or Pledge Floor Care, and I'll come back and I'll add a little bit of gloss to these lights. You know, a lot of people, and I used to just use like the Tamiya clear red and clear green, but I don't really think that's necessary, especially on such a small scale. I think just painting it and then adding the gloss at the end is sufficient. Doesn't make much of a difference. So there we go. Now I'm not going to run through how I lay down the gloss coat. I did that on a few videos ago. So I'm just going to mix it really thin, put a thin layer down. I may go a little bit heavier up front where I know I have hairspray, just to add a little bit more protection. But there we go, fellas. I'm going to get the gloss down and we'll come back and add some decals. Okay, so I got the decals on. Now, I didn't put all the decals on. In my opinion, there's some diminishing returns, especially with the really small decals and Tamiya decals at that. I decided to leave a lot of the really small ones off just because they're so hard to manage, and you know, they're just thick, and you can see that one down there is just thick. And I could spray a bunch of coats of clear and then sand it, but to be honest with you, that's really not worth the trouble. So I left a lot of the smaller ones off because I think it will detract from the model rather than add to it. So so there we go. I've got Miss Virginia on, and that actually doesn't look too bad. And then this little decal up here, and there were these small little like faint numbers that they had me put on, and I added those. But yeah, and then I put the no step up along the windows because those are fairly prominent. Now, there were decals that went along. I assume these are like places where they fill up with fuel. And instead of putting the decals down, what I did is I just took some paint and just hand brushed some areas because I had chipped around those a lot. So I figured, you know, if there's going to be that much wear and tear on it, then I'm not going to have a big prominent decal on there that's all in one piece. And rather than put the decal on and try to scrape it off, I just hit some spots around those to make it look like, you know, it was kind of worn off. And so that's what I did with that. Now, the base, I did that yesterday. So I got the base painted. And I got this idea from looking at World War II propaganda posters. And there was a neat one where they had this little phrase down here, lightning strikes the axis. So then I added some lightning and some silhouettes of some other P-38s. So I thought that's kind of cool. And then I weathered it. So I've got videos on how I build my bases. So if you want to check that out, I didn't include that in this video. Okay, so now what we're doing is I'm going to just add some post shading to the bottom of the plane. Now, I'm not going to like super weather this out. I will probably do an oil wash or a panel line wash, and then maybe a little bit of oil work. I don't know. Like I said, I usually get burnt out by that time. So we're going to do some post shading. So I've got my Procon Boy 770 here, my real fine airbrush. And I've got some smoke, Tamiya smoke, which is a translucent, it's basically Tamiya X20, was it X22 clear with a little bit of blackish brownish tint in it, okay? And then I've got some isopropyl alcohol. So I'm going to thin this down with IPA. Go ahead and open this stuff up. And I'm just gonna mix this right in the color cup. So we'll throw a little IPA in here. And then add some Tamiya smoke. I want to not go really heavy on this. And you'll see what I mean here in a minute. Because if you mix this too thick and you spray it on too heavy, it'll really come out and be overbearing. And I want it to be somewhat subtle, but I do want to add some post shading. Now the reason that I'm mixing this with the isopropyl alcohol is because I'm spraying a thin coat, and it dries a lot quicker than if I used Mr. Color Leveling Thinner. So you can see there I get a nice fine line. All right, so we'll start up here. And what's nice about this is since it is somewhat translucent. Ooh, even started to get some spider webbing right there. And if I mess up, I can always come back in and touch this up. So even that I've got my air compressor set at like 13 PSI, but it really, with this small needle, the air doesn't shoot out as well for some reason as it does in the in my Iwata HPCS. Now, I don't know if the video's picking this up. So let's take a look at what we've got. You can see there that I've added just a little bit of post shading on this wing, and obviously this wing doesn't have it. and this does. And when you're sitting there spraying it, you can hardly tell that it's going on, but it just adds a little bit of extra. Okay, so I'm going to get on doing that to the rest of the bottom, and then I'll bring it all the way up to the edge. It's so light you probably won't. I don't have to be too careful around where the olive drab meets the gray, because I don't think it's going to show through the green as much as it does the lighter gray color. But if it does, then I can always come in and touch up. But so that's how I'm going to do the post shading on the bottom. All right, fellas, so I have skipped ahead. Now I did do a slightly a lighter shade of green panel line wash on the upper surfaces. It's kind of hard to tell. It doesn't show through a whole lot. It is a little bit different than what it was if I didn't do the panel line wash. I think it just brings them out just a tad. It's very subtle. On the bottom, I did a little bit darker wash just to dirty it up. I didn't use straight black. I used like a smoke color for the bottom. And I'm not going to do a whole lot of oil work. I'm pretty happy with the way it is. And you know, for the image that I had in my head, I think I've got it pretty close. I also added a little bit of smoke staining along the back, and I don't know if the camera's going to pick it up too much. I've seen a lot of P-38s where there's a lot of smoke staining, and I didn't want that. I don't like the way it looks. I've seen a picture. This is representative of a picture that I pulled up off the internet, and it's somewhat subtle, so I'm going to be happy with that. Now, since I've got the final matte coat on it, and I use Winsor & Newton Artist Acrylic Matte UV Varnish, which is my favorite. It gives it a nice dull finish. I thin it with Mr. Vallejo airbrush thinner, and I get it pretty thin. It just gives it a nice finish, okay? So now what we're going to do is we're going to tackle the turbochargers. And I'm going to start with some pigments, okay? So I've got Amomig modeling pigment, and this is dark earth. And then I've got metal slag, okay? So basically what I like to do, and these get real messy. So let's get the model out of the way before I get it all over the model. So I just shake it up so I can get a little bit on the lid. And just use the lid. If you've never used pigments before, they can be a little bit tricky. I like to use them on my MAK kits to make dirt and stuff. And then I've got the pigment fixer. Now this isn't straight mineral spirits. I don't know what it is exactly. I don't know if it has it here on the ingredients. I don't see it. Yeah, I don't know what the ingredients are. But what it does is when you mix, you can do this a couple different ways. You can mix the pigment fixer with the actual pigment and make like a slush if you want to make it nice and muddy and sticky. Or what I like to do is I'm going to go ahead and take some of this dark earth pigment. Got my brush here. And it's best to do this on a flat coat so it sticks a little better. I'm just going to put some on here. Now that base coat that we did with the grays and the tan, most of that's going to show through, but this pigment is going to give it a little bit of variation in color and make it look kind of beat up and rusty. I'll take some of this metal slag. I'm going to put some of this metal slag on here as well. Now what I'm doing is I'm trying to work it into the into the part. So I'm not really brushing it on. I'm just kind of working it. Okay, now I do have some on the on the outside of them where I actually want it, but that's okay because we're gonna put the pigment fixer only on the actual turbocharger. So now I'm just gonna take the pigment fixer, dip my brush into it, and just hit it with the pigment fixer. Now, I've actually airbrushed this on before, but unless you've got it really, the pigment really hammered down, the air from the airbrush tends to really move it around. So I found if I just brush it on like this, just not really, I guess, brushing it, I'm just kind of soaking the part in this pigment fixer, that I can control it a lot better, the pigment that's on there. Okay. Now I will hit this with a hairdryer and dry that off, and then we'll come back and look at it and then see if I'll probably hit it with an oil wash just to bring out some of those details. Okay, so it is dry, and you know what? I don't think I'm gonna hit it with an oil wash. I think it's gonna be fine, and I kind of like the way that looks. It's not completely dry on the inside there, but I'm pretty happy with it. Now I've already started, but I can take some of this and I can dirty up some of this back here and add a little bit more. Now this has a propensity to rub off if you handle it, but it does give you a nice effect. Take some of this darker metal slag and just kind of dirty some stuff up. There we go. All right, I think I'm going to be happy with that. But there is a little bit of sheen left in there, and I think that's just because it's there's still a little bit of pigment fixer in there. It hasn't dried out. Let's throw some of this metal slag in there and just see what that does. All right. I think I'm going to be happy with that, fellas. All right, so I'm going to get the masking off, and then I will take, let's go ahead and get this stuff. This gets really messy. Let's go ahead and grab some of my gloss, aka Future, and I just put it in this separate container. And we'll go ahead and I'll add my gloss to the lights. And then I can pretty much call this one done. There's a lot more stuff I could do. I could do some more oil work, but I'm not going to do that. Oh, there is one more thing that I need to do. Is there are mirrors on the inside of the engine cowls here that I need to put on. Now they give you decals, but I think what I'm going to do is use bare metal foil, and I'm going to have to cut those out. So I can either cut those out with a Cricut or cut them out by hand. So I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to do that. And I also need to paint the inside of these lights down here and then put the window glass in, which I can do that. I can do that whenever. So, all right, see you in a bit. Okay, so to finish this up, I'm going to make some mirrors out of bare metal foil. And this is the ultra bright chrome. It's, you know, it's pretty good representation for a mirror. Obviously, it's not going to be a mirror shine, but I've already got one on, and they go right along here along the bottom. So see there, okay. So I got that one on, and how I did it is I've got the decal here. They do provide you these decals, which aren't too bad, but I'm not going to put a decal on after I get my final flat coat on. And if I'd have put it on before the flat coat, well, it would have looked gray because it would have been dulled down. So what I've done is I've got a little metal template here, and I found one that's pretty close. It's not exact, but it's pretty darn close. See, I think it was this one right here, this 5x8. Okay, so all I'm doing, and I want to take a sharp X-Acto blade, so I get a brand new X-Acto blade, and we'll see if we can get this on camera. And this is a metal template, so don't have to worry about cutting through it. And I'm just going to go along. It doesn't take much to cut this bare metal foil. Just going to follow this around. Okay, I think it should come up. Okay, so let's go ahead and lift this off. This can be a little bit tricky. Okay, so now I got my little piece. Get this out of the way. This is where I need 3 hands. So now I'm just going to put it on here. Now what I can do is take, where's my cotton swab? I like these little micro cotton swabs. And I'm just going to start burnishing it down. Just like so. And I know it might be kind of hard to see. And that is all there is to it. So now I've got my mirror on. Both of them on, just like that. So there we go, okay? Alrighty, well, I've got this little doohickey up here on top of the canopy glued on. I've got my balancers on. I accidentally painted this one green. I'm gonna leave it green. Should have been gray. I didn't think about it at the time. So I can throw my propellers on and we should be good to go.